Добрый день.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Está dedicada a los eventos más grandes que pasen en las ciudades más bellos. Давайте мы поучаствуем в сессии, послушаем.
So let us participate in the session and we'll listen to the speakers. So, before I give the floor to the speakers and name them, I would like, on behalf of Natalia Sergunina, to thank Moscow for greatest FIFA 2018. Moscow, thank you. Natalia, will you refer my thanks to Mayor and other Moscow city government? Thank you. And before I name the speakers, let's watch a 2-minute movie.
In fact, some say the information age is over. In the experience economy, experience itself becomes the product. And it's booming, as more and more of us choose to spend money on an experience rather than buying a physical item. Culture and events are an ever-increasing draw for cities as we travel more. The number of international tourists grew in 2017, and this rise is expected to continue. Hong Kong pulled in almost 30 million tourists in 2017, followed by Bangkok and London. Travel and tourism creates prosperity across the globe. It accounts for over 1/10 of global GDP and 1 in 10 of all jobs. London's event leisure tourism contributes over $3.5 billion to the city's economy, and its art and culture industry generates $4.5 billion. Large-scale urban events offer one of the best platforms for creative industries to flourish. They also contribute to the prosperity, image, and long-term development of cities. 6.5 million people danced at the world's largest party this year, the Carnival, in Rio de Janeiro. Just 1 week of festivities created over 70,000 jobs and injected $800 million into the economy. And it's expected that the World Cup in Russia will boost the country's GDP by up to $30 billion by 2023. The majority of urban residents view public events as an opportunity to express themselves and build their personal brand. So how can cities harness this potential?
Обещали 2 минуты.
You promised for 2 minutes. We can watch this probably movie once again. I've introduced Natalia Sergunina. Из Порто к нам приехал мэр Руй Морейра.
Бонжур, Николас. Руководитель глобального направления путешествий и туризма BCG. Они выиграли чемпионат мира.
Nicholas Bodin, chief of the global development for tourism. Nicholas Bodin, mayor of Porto, is with us. Rui Motera, Vatin Partasov, vice president of the Federation of Restaurators, and also partner Alliance Hotel Management. Also Miguel Sanfillo, so the founder and creative director of Sakarat Studio, Valencia, Italy.
Как вы тут устроили все это?
Видите, Natalia, tell us how everything looks like. So, dear friends, I'm so happy to welcome all of you at the Urban Forum. So, for us, this event is also important after the FIFA Championship, and now we can discuss the results of it, not only concerning who won it, but what it gives to the Russian economy. Moscow is the rapidly developing megapolis, so morally, we were not ready to FIFA Championship, but the government did prepare everything. New stadiums were built, and Mayor Sobyanin has voiced it the plenary session of today. He also said that Moscow city government aimed at creating good, rapidly developing, comfortable environment for Muscovites and for tourists too. You know, today, Muscovites make quite a small percentage of the country's population, but we are responsible for more than 20% investments and also GDP. So, not certainly, but raw materials, yes? Muscovites are people who are used to be demandful. So what we've been trying to organize, we've been trying to do so carefully as we could. So, comparing to some European or world big cities, we've been trying to develop as quickly as possible to be in line with the international cities and with the world economy. So we had to change as rapidly as we could. And we did manage to do it. We've managed to change transport. And you can see that we have now the Moscow Central Ring. We have new infrastructure for public transport. Sorry for a technical break. In the plenary session, Vice Mayor Husnulin is going to speak.
Starts in Muscovites Hall, featuring Moscow's Vice Mayor of City Construction and Policy, Husnulin.
С чемпионатом лучше получилось, да.
Трудно конкурировать с градостроительством.
We had to be competitive, and it's difficult to compete with developers because the developers are really rapidly developing. But let us look at what we've managed to do. So we've started to develop transport. Also, we try to develop our environment, making us as comfortable as possible. So we improve pedestrian zones, we try to improve parks, we try to improve everything so that Muscovites, when they leave their home, like it and feel satisfied. We wanted Muscovites to leave their homes and be happy and get to their jobs surrounded by a comfortable environment. Cultural, innovative, financial environment is important, but accessible transport, accessibility of cultural objects has made to look at what is going on in Moscow from a different angle. So we have more than 200 events per day. We have more than 300 theaters. And on a regular basis, something new emerges there. New plays, new performances, and this happens every day. So we have more than 70 huge sports events this year. Sports environment and infrastructure is developing rapidly. We have a 10% increase of sports shops, restaurants, cafes. This infrastructure is also developing rapidly. But we can see how the restaurants change, and the mere concept of restaurants of 2010 and 2018 is different. So we have a lot of restaurants, and they have an opportunity of free spaces on the year. So this is how we work in collaboration with the restaurants. We fund accessible environment of high quality. Thus, we also develop some other trends we never expected. Medical tourism, for example, it develops 15–20% per year. So people come to Moscow for medical care from abroad. And Moscow is becoming one of the leaders here. We have a medical cluster there. Originally, it was made for Muscovites. We wanted Muscovites to have accessible medical care, health care of high quality. But it also stimulated people from other regions and even other countries to come for Moscow for treatment and medical care. Education is another important cluster. Now Moscow has improved its rating comparing with other schools and universities internationally and globally. So we funded our infrastructure. Now we have more tourists. Speaking about tourists emerges in a discussion. Who is the tourist? Can we call a tourist a person who comes to Moscow from the outskirts, or only those who come to Moscow from other countries or other cities? So for us, we define tourists as people who come to Moscow from other cities, not part of the Moscow area and other countries. So let's have a look. We have now 21.6 million tourists, and this is the figure for this year. From that, we have about 7 billion rubles as a revenue. Some people think that tourists come, and this is just a matter of fact. But statistics does not agree with this. So, what happened in the year 2013-14? You remember, it was a time of crisis. Before that, tourism was developing. After that, after the crisis, we could see only stagnation in this area. So now we don't have so many business tourists, but we have more and more just tourists who come to Moscow for pleasure, for fun. So the increase of tourism now we have is due to the increase of interesting places and events in Moscow. And this is a matter of funding. Tourists, like Muscovites, they are demandful. They want good environment. This is the figure we have today. During FIFA, 90% of hotels were fully booked. FIFA, yes, it is an event, but this is also the consequence of the work which has been performed by us for a long time. And now we have the revenues which covers all the funds invested in the city. So we have now profit. And this profit, this money, we can invest further in the environment, which is important for Muscovites. And this is transport, education, etc., etc. We have 1.5 thousand of hotels in Moscow today. So this sector is also developing, and we are in line with the figure of other megapolises. Before we had peak seasons and we had seasons with no booking, no tourists. Now the figure is on average 70%. During FIFA, it was 90% and sometimes it was even more. Let me say a few words about FIFA. The figures are just preliminary because we don't have all the statistics yet. But some figures we still have. So what do we have now? So 96.6 billion of rubles was the revenue in the budget. 13.2 billion rubles is the figure which went to Moscow city budget. Some more money went to the federal budget too, and Mayor Sobyanin has voiced it today during the plenary session. So we can say that we've covered the expenses and the allocations already, and we'll cover them further, and we'll have more revenues and more profits. So tourism is one of the branches which is really profitable, even more profitable than construction. We have new growth points. VDNH is one of them. It is a park which is now in renovation status. After improvement and renovation, we'll have about more than 40 million people who would be attracted by this platform. We'll have a lot of projects there, educational, some amusements, and what's more. So this architectural place, which was started in 1930s, is now rapidly developing. That may be another attraction point for tourists, and also there can be a lot of events attracting Muscovites. For instance, the festival Вдохновение or Inspiration is now attracting many people, and it attracts a lot of people. So what has improved about Moscow? It has become convenient, comfortable, green, with many street places. And thanks to that, we have a lot of street festivals, so we have a lot of visitors there. 62 million people, and then these are Muscovites, these are national and international guests. And they have brand, which is famous not only in Moscow, but nationally and internationally. For example, «Путешествие в Рождество», a journey to Christmas, is a festival which attracts a lot of people who plan it, who plan the journey, and who plan their budget. 62 billion rubles is the turnover thanks to this kind of events. These are only festivals. This is due and thanks to festivals. So what we have now, festivals cover the funds and allocations, and also they are part of the environment, and these are events which are very important for Muscovites. Moscow and Moscow festivals give start to new startups. And startup companies, they have an opportunity to promote themselves and to make their brand famous. This takes place in the streets and in some supermarkets. So this kind of festivals can be started for smaller business. Moscow seasons for startups and smaller business have become a start for national city and regional developers and startups. So this kind of events attract startup companies from Moscow, from other cities, and even from other countries. Is this beneficial for Muscovites? Yes, it is. And thanks to that, we also have more tourists and more money for the city budget. Moscow has become fashionable. And the most important thing which took place during FIFA is the mind change. The visitors vote with their likes, with their selfies for Moscow. And this is how we can attract more tourists better than by some advertisements. New restaurants, new investors in Moscow develop our city, and we are competitive for investments, for talents, for tourists with other international cities. I think we have a lot of advantages for that. And also, during this forum, we will listen to our colleagues from other countries and other cities and to try to imply it here in Moscow for development.
Thank you, Natalia. I was excited to know that we have like 1,500 hotels. When we wrote our request for the World Cup, we hardly found 200 hotels. And when we told that there will be 1,000, FIFA experts told us it's impossible to build 600 or 700 in the time remaining. But it proved to be possible. Yes, so hotels and other residents. Yeah, but if you remember, we had only 200 hotels, but the flow of tourists, so it was easily predictable. You have available stadiums, you multiply them by the number of games, and if you're lucky, and if you have English or Swedish people traveling, or Mexicans and 40,000 people, or Peruvians who just want to leave their country and sing with us. Okay, so Rumoreiro, the mayor of Porto, will tell us about the experience of his city. But as Natalia said, we started to bring people to the streets via cafes, via festivals, via events. So it has been long implemented in Porto. So Nikolska worked only for the time of the World Cup, but it happens in Porto all through the year. I would like the mayor of Porto to tell us how to ensure that it is attractive.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. Well done, Moscow. Well done, Russian Federation. It's a pleasure also to be in this beautiful building. Let me tell you a little bit about Porto. 5 years ago, when our platform came to power, an independent platform of citizens without parties, what did we find about the city? Everybody told us it's the best kept secret in Europe. Which is something which is fun, but it doesn't make any sense for the citizens, and it doesn't make any sense for business. We also found that the city was Unesco Heritage, and because of that, a lot of the city had lost inhabitants. To live in an archaeological site, as you know, is not exactly the sort of thing that you enjoy. It becomes very expensive to develop a city. Another thing we noticed is there was no branding in the city. The city was known for what? For the port wine, with a name called Port. It was known by the football team, FC Porto. And in English, everybody said, "Oh, Porto," which even started with a different letter. So we did not have any branding. Whenever we tried to explain what Porto was, it was really difficult. So what did we have as tools? We had this magnificent city because we have a river, we have the Douro Valley, we have the monuments, we have the sea, the beach. It's a manageable territory, safe territory, no criminality. And we thought we really have to develop tourism. And we had the luck of having a very good airport, which has won several prizes over the last years. And at the same time, this starting effect of the low-cost companies, which suddenly impacted enormously in our country, especially Southern Europe, Central Europe. So we thought, well, how are we going to cope? And we thought, at the same time, remember, Portugal was in a crisis like Greece was. We had the budgetary crisis, but not the city. The city had very good accounts. Actually, we are now absolutely debt-free. So we thought we have been organizing events traditionally, like in ancient times. Remember, events go back to classical civilizations. They really go back to Athens, they go back to Rome, and they go back to Jerusalem. But for many, all these events were certainly not worldwide. They were an affirmation of power, but they were not democratized. And in recent years, what we had noticed was a number of international events had gone global. Why? Because people travel these days much cheaper than 40 years ago, and people want experience, what was said in the introduction by Alexander, which is very much what we thought. People, in fact, at one stage they traveled, only a few people traveled because traveling was very expensive. People traveled to know the local costumes, or people traveled to theme parks. And suddenly we thought, actually what we are doing in the cities is importing theme parks into the city and giving people experience. That's what happened here with your World Cup. A lot of people came to Moscow and they stayed even though their team was not playing, or what happened with Portugal, that team was sent off very early. So people really want to come into a city, and they want the city to be able to give them experience in gastronomy, in wine, in history, fun. What do people want? They want to visit a city which is comfortable, which includes a number of things I don't have to detail, and they want the city to be interesting. And then, if they like it, they will come back even when there are no events. The thing is, probably most of you agree that once you have visited the city for a certain event or for a certain exhibition, if you like it, you tend to think, I want to come back. And then you want to find another part of the city. And the recurring tourist is the best tourist. You know why? Because he doesn't flock in places where there are already too many people. The tourist is a sort of discoverer of the city when he comes a second time. But of course, you have to feed them with different events. And what we thought is, every year we have to give them different events. So we started, and first we looked at power boating in the river. Then we looked at the Red Bull air race on another year. Then we look at rallying in the middle of the city, as you see, on another year. So we try every year to do something different. Also on the musical side, we decided to have a very big event, which is also organized with Barcelona together, which we organize in the city park. But we thought, this is, people have to pay a ticket to go there. And what we thought is, we need our citizens to understand what is going on and to offer them also some free events in the city. And whereas it seemed to be an impossible investment, it's not. Because the business very rapidly adjusted itself to these events. Not only hotels, but the beer company, the wine company, the insurance companies, they all sort of saw that this was an enormous possibility to connect their name to the branding of the city. So when we now try to sell the beer of the city in China, which is a very difficult market, the immediate thing that shows up is the connection with the city logo. And the city logo is associated with a lot of events that are very attractive in China and which are attracting a lot of tourists. So we sort of tried this combination. However, this poses problems. First of all, the population, in the beginning, they were suspicious because they thought we were going to destroy the budget. Now they found out no, because we have been able to reduce taxes because of these events. But it took time to persuade them that this was not just fun. Of course, some people say, this mayor just wants parties. So it takes time. Another thing is, once these events start happening, there are still some people who don't want their regular routine life to be upset. They want to be able to leave their homes and come home. So it's very important at the same time, the city is investing in, you were talking about that, how to invest in public space. The public space cannot just be, it cannot just be a theater. It cannot be, and you have to make sure that the citizens feel they are also spectators. It's not only for the foreign people, but more than that, that they are the actors of the change of the city. And once they feel they are actors, that they can interfere and that they can call upon us and say, look, why don't you organize a new party in that park which needs to be rebuilt because it hasn't been touched for the last 40 years. Then people sort of start getting into the mood. And what has happened is that we found out, and that we did not predict, which was entrepreneurship, the small entrepreneurs. People who had been unemployed, who had lost their jobs, and suddenly they started with micro business. The events are fantastic to start micro business because they know, at least during the days of the events, it will be like a boost, you know? It's like a rocket that starts their business. And once they start, a lot of them have been able to succeed. And now there are brands of different things in the city of Porto, which even producing tiles, which has not been done for 200 years, or were done in big factories. And now there are people doing it in small factories, in houses. People producing small brands of beer or wine, or and this is the sort of thing that defeats gentrification. Because one of the fears, of course, we have is gentrification. Everyone around the world is talking about gentrification. The only way is, first, to improve the daily routine of citizens and to persuade them that the city must be comfortable and interesting. If it's comfortable and interesting for those who visit us, it must be more comfortable and interesting for us, and it must bring wealth, which is actually what people generally want. Normally, a citizen wants the city to be, first of all, he wants to have enough wealth to be able to live with his family and children. He wants the services of the city not to be upset by these events. And I noticed how much you made an effort in Moscow, fantastic. And then, of course, you need them to believe that this creates wealth, creates employment, and does not destroy tradition. And it is very important, that's my last word on this first round. Never forget that tradition through culture is what melts people together. And it's also what foreign people who visit us, they want to see. Otherwise, an event could just be anywhere. And, but when you really want to base it in your city and to make sure that the people who come for the event, they come back, try always to show them a little bit of your home culture, a little bit of your traditions. Try to show them a little bit why they should come back. If they find out there is something to discover, and I think a lot of people came to Moscow this time, my first time, I promise you I will come back because I found out there is a lot to see, which I probably only found because I'm here today. Thank you.
Gracias, caballero. Большое спасибо. Я услышал в этом выступлении такую достаточно...
Thank you very much. I've heard in your presentation a very interesting link between brands, events, and marketing, which helps to work together and make the city rich. So the city has some elements, they develop together, they can develop thanks to the city and the opportunities the city has. And I think that we, Moscow, are only at the beginning of this journey towards operational marketing, though we have all the elements to be successful there. Porto has the blast for the seashore. It has the sea, and you can have tourists longer, which makes the tourist sector easier. Our project is more ambitious because for 6 months, Moscow does not only expect tourists, but tries to make the environment quite okay. Mayor Sobyanin has voiced that the temperature goes beyond zero more than 50 times in winter. And this is what no other city in the world faces. There is one more factor which makes us different from Porto. We have 20 million in city residents, and these are the people who stay here constantly. So I'd like to give the floor to the next speaker, and this is Nicholas Botin, who works in BCG. He is in charge of global directions in tourism and travels. So my question is as follows. It would have been convenient to have FIFA every year. Maybe expensive, but very good. But it is impossible because there are other cities and other places. So the next FIFA will probably take place in, I don't know, in 50 years, even more. So I would like to ask you, Nicholas, that
22 год, да?
yes, the next FIFA will be in Qatar in the year 2022. I don't know how they will make it possible because they will have 200 stadiums and 44 teams. I don't know where, I don't know how. But Nicholas, do the citizens suffer when there are too many tourists? So what are the global trends making a mega city mega attractive for tourists and mega comfortable for Muscovites? So what are the solutions and what are the mechanisms of today?
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much to the previous participants who stole most of the things I wanted to say, in particular you from the Porto mayor. I think Porto has been demonstrating a lot of the good ideas that we see around the world. So I will just try to comment on some of those and possibly enlarge them. So, as you said, I'm leading the business of travel and tourism for BCG, so I have the privilege to. So I'm French, and I live in Moscow. I've been living in Moscow for 6 years. I lived in Hong Kong in the past, in the US, and I lead the team globally at BCG, who is supporting travel and tourism projects. So I have the privilege to see how the same issues arise in different places of the world and how different cities and different countries try to address those. And so after all these years, I have something which I think is very clear to my mind, which is what has been discussed in Moscow and Porto already, which is that you cannot develop a successful tourism strategy if it's not sustainable. And by sustainable, I mean not deteriorating your heritage, natural or cultural, not deteriorating your culture, your tradition, and also not upsetting your citizen. There is no successful tourism strategy anywhere in the world that will be successful against its own citizen. And some of the issues that have been mentioned before are true everywhere. One of the elements, so this conviction is supported by several elements. The first one is that people will have more and more choices. I think it was mentioned before, people travel globally. I think in 2012, there were 44 cities in the world with more than 3 million tourists, 44 cities. Just 5 years after, 2017, it's 70 cities. So people will have cheap travel, low-cost carriers, everything, and they will have many more choices. And if they go once, or if one of their friends go once to a place which is not friendly, where they are not well received, where the comfort of the experience was not good, they will not come back and they will tell their friends. So it's very critical in this more competitive world to really work on the quality of the experience and not just trying to play this, I would say traditional but a bit stupid volume, promotion, advertising play to bring people, spend a few days doing kind of stupid things and go back forever. I think these days are gone. So the solution is really to develop this sustainable tourism, which means qualitative tourism, high-quality tourism, which means basically developing things that will be as appealing, as interesting, as attractive for the people visiting and for the people living. So the entire notion of experience, impression, is basically the convergence of the policies for the foreigners and the policies for the people living here. And this is, I would say, everywhere in the world now the direction that is taken. There are several examples of things that have not gone so well. I can tell you I'm from Paris. I can tell you if you're in Paris and if you see millions of tourists coming over, the Japanese, the Chinese, and everybody else, and if you live in some district of Paris, people will just simply have a very strong feeling against tourism. And actually you have places where I would say it's even more than strong feeling. They just dislike them, and they're not, and this is translated into bad service, bad atmosphere. So Paris is trying to, like Barcelona, for example, had similar issues in some places, and also places like Bangkok, Angkor Wat, Taj Mahal, all these kind of iconic places which have been totally buried under tourism, face the same issues. So the first reaction is to react negatively, and then you have to take corrective actions which are not good for the business and not good for tourism. You have to limit, for example, the number of tourists that can be allowed to a certain place, or you will have to find new mechanism of arbitrage between the citizens living here and the tourists, which are all defensive actions. And I think that's something probably you have to do when you've been too far, but that's something that you can try to avoid if you have a more thoughtful and preemptive way of thinking about tourism. To develop, which is this experience-based tourism. So to develop this experience-based tourism, it was said before, some of the key success factors is to get people to come back. When you visit Moscow the first time, you go to the Red Square and the Tretiakov. When you go the second time, you go to the Golden Ring. When you go the third time, you go to somewhere near a lake or something. And you go into different places and you dilute the pressure from the tourism. To bring people back, you need to give them a reason to come back. And one of the main driver for people to visit and to come back is really a combination of two things. The events calendar, we come back to that. You need to give reasons for people to come back, and everything related to the word of mouth, which the scientific name is advocacy marketing. So it's everything related to you tell a friend something, and as you know, people tend to believe far more what their friends tell them, in particular on the social media, than what advertising can tell them. In the case of the World Championship, we also took the liberty to make a little survey, and we realized that the people who visited, I live in Moscow for 6 years, I love this city, I know the city has changed tremendously, but every time I come back to France or visit a place, it takes me like half an hour to explain how the city is good, and people initially are still skeptic. But the World Cup was like, I don't know, 1 million people coming here and being shocked by how good the city was, and not only Moscow, but maybe other cities, but in Moscow in particular. They were shocked to see how the city was modern and vibrant, and people welcoming, and cleanliness, and so on, and safe. These people will come back, and they will start sharing these stories, and this is all the effect that we were discussing before. This will have a snowballing effect. But obviously, you need to continue that. As I said, we did a little survey. The score is amazing. This NPS, Net Promoter Score, people who will actively recommend the city the next time. For the people who visited the World Championship, it's 47% for the foreigners, which is huge. I mean, if you take any other brand, any other airlines, any other hotel, you will have NPS scores between 10, 20, 30. The best one, 40, 50. But this is really a high score. And so it shows how much I think the city has changed, and how much you can start surfing a very good wave of positive emotions around the city of Moscow. But obviously, you need to do that again and again. This advocacy marketing thing works in a way that there are three basic mechanisms. You have to get a good story, and the story is the World Cup this time, but you need to invent much more stories. The story needs to be surprising, impactful. It could be based on that event, it could be based on something else. The second thing that you need to do is you need to find your promoters. So the communities, the online communities, the communities of different kinds of different countries, sport people, culture people, that will relay your message, and that will use the social media as a way to broadcast this message and create this word of mouth that will actually be much more efficient for the experience-based economy than just advertising. You cannot say on a billboard spending millions of dollars on plain advertising saying, we are nice people. Nobody believes you, it's advertising, right? But if a friend tells you this, and it's supported by a nice anecdote, okay, you believe it, and the next time you come to Moscow. So overall, I would say, Moscow has, as you know, a challenging starting position. The image of Russia overall is still challenging, improving, but still challenging. The city is perceived sometimes too expensive, sometimes, not even safe, which, for the people living here is a surprise, but it's a perception abroad. So you need to have all this campaign to overcome this, let's say, bad historical perceptions and also telling the good stories. The other two things, obviously, you need to do, as I said, is one is to create the reason for people to come back. And, we discussed the World Championship. And we also did another survey, which was interesting, which is how does people react to event? Do they talk about it? And we looked at the chat and the forum of TripAdvisors. And you see all the events in Moscow. A lot of events in Moscow, it was mentioned before. But if you do a couple of 1,000 kilometers away, what people will remind, World Cup is different, but they will remind, for example, the Festival of the Light over the Christmas and the New Year. And that's basically it. So, the word of mouth will not go beyond Russia if the event is not global, is not recurring, is not reaching a scale and an importance that will go beyond the border. So I would really encourage cities like Moscow to create even more events which are, by their scale and by their importance, create enough a critical mass of messaging and a critical mass of emotion that it will go beyond the borders. And obviously, I will just finish by saying that also as a foreigner, I was having many friends coming. Obviously, all that makes sense if you continue to work on the basics of the quality of the city, which I think is already amazing, but you can always do better in cleanliness, in restaurants, in hotels, in safety, in transport, all that, of course. Continue in this direction. And in addition of that, fixing some of the basics like, making the visa easier, making the air travel better connected, and so on, which are, some of the friction that are not preventing people to come, but make it a little bit more difficult. So I would say more global recurring event, fixing the basics of connectivity and access, and orchestrating in a very mechanical and sustainable way this advocacy marketing are some of the, let's say, the trends that we see globally.
Спасибо, Николас. У меня один вопрос.
Thank you, Nicholas, and I have one question for you. What about France? Do they allow selling beer in stadiums in France? To sell beer, selling beer in French stadiums, is it allowed? Beer, alcoholic beer. Can you buy beer in stadiums?
I just have no.
Okay, is it okay in Portugal to sell beer in the stadiums?
Not inside the stadium, not during the game, no.
Really?
No, you can on the outskirts around the stadium, not inside. No
Sure.
alcohol, no cigarettes allowed.
Я рассчитывал на поддержку
Because of hooliganism.
Запада. Дело в том, что
I just wanted support from our Western colleagues because some years ago, our deputies prohibited selling beer in stadiums. And that, just diminished the amount of fans.
So they go happy to the stadium, and also they drink it after, so they go happy at home. So it's a sort of combination.
Окей. Вадим Прасов, ательеры, рестораторы.
So, clients And I would like to give the floor to Vadim Pras, Vice President of Alliance Hotel Management. So please tell me, Vadim, it is impossible to launch new restaurant for FIFA. Some of them probably think that FIFA has made them rich, but they need to develop further, because they will have less tourists. Well, this is a question of statistics. We can compare this year to with some other year before the crisis. So FIFA is just an event. We now have these statistics. On the other hand, we have more than 8,000 hotels or other places which can be booked, and this is a figure which is higher than the one you have represented. Answering your question concerning new hotels, new restaurants, you know, I don't think it makes sense to construct new hotels or to launch new restaurants, especially for FIFA or to some other event. What is the driver for new restaurants or new hotels? Only this stable flow of tourists. Profitable for the city economy can be this kind of driver. Let us look back at the year 2013, 2014. There was a crisis, and the economy went down. What do we have today? FIFA is the driver for Muscovites. It has helped us to believe that Moscow is a city for tourists. Because, you know, traditionally, St. Petersburg has been a city for tourism and Moscow more a city for business. But the perception has changed. It would have been great if we had FIFA every year, making us a bit tired, but we're hospitable and we're happy. But, you know, this is not a reality. We have a lot of festivals, a lot of events. We don't have to have a lot of them, maybe 2, but bomba, just coolest ones, which need to attract everyone. Those about which tourists need to think, wow, I need to visit it at least once in my life. There are festivals or events like this. Let us have Montreux Jazz Festival as an example. And we may think how lucky they are. But they are successful. And we can have this kind of events here. It can be regular events lasting for 2 or 3 weeks that can attract tourists. And President Putin has stated that tourism needs to be developed by the end of the year. We want tourists to come back, and the visa for those people who came here for FIFA, they can come back to Moscow without any other visa until the end of the year. Well, maybe it makes sense to reject the visa. because, you know, those people who have come to Moscow already, they will probably have difficulties in coming back until December. You know, they need to have time, they need to have money, then they have to have holidays or vacation. You are right. Speaking about fans from Latin America, some of them had to sell their flats, apartments, to come to Moscow. I don't think they will come back until December. But the fans from Germany, well, they will probably come back, but I don't think they will come back until the end of the year. But they will probably recommend their friends to come to Moscow. Miguel, I need to tell something, Miguel, and to give the floor to him. Miguel Seifelio, creative director of Sziget Studio. Miguel is a true expert for launching small but bomba events, and he's responsible for the festival in Valencia. Yes, for 10 years we've been launching different festivals, also international ones, in Valencia. Probably you know Tomatsina in the city of Buñol. Well, you know how many tomatoes per hour are spent there. It's the special festival for tomatoes. A lot of people are attracted there. So many people from different cities come to visit this small town of Buñol, which makes the infrastructure difficult. You know, there were a lot of traffic jams, so try to change it. We started with image. We've created websites and also profiles in social media to have special tools for communication. Tomatina is a very famous event, but we needed to improve the infrastructure. So we used the resources the local authorities had. And we also wanted that festival to be beneficial for the town's economy and climate. So we didn't want only Buñol to have profits from this event when more than 3 million euros is spent. But we wanted Valencia or other cities and towns next to Buñol to have benefit as well. So we suggested to set up some events next to Buñol and linked with the festival. So this kind of chain of events have become part of Tomatina. Now, many people with their families could come to those holidays with their families and have a good time. This is a very important event for Valencia, where tourism has major impact. Why is it like this? Why do people actually come to Tomatina? What drives them? A lot of things, but we don't want any interruption between Tomatina festivals.
You cannot imagine how many people producing cars or white goods. So they use the brand Tomatina to sell, and this is a registered brand that can bring profit for everyone thanks to the festival being famous. If we would look from professional point of view, we will see a huge resource. So first of all, we introduced a ticket, and people have to pay to take part in this holiday. But for people who live in Buñol, they can use money paid by guests to improve the budget and different structures in the city itself. Last year, sponsors alone got 80 million euros, which allowed them to improve the local budget. 220,000 were spent on outdoor advertising, but money paid back. Through the operators we contacted, we launched promotion for the festival to attract people from other countries. And we had to identify the target groups which we will work with in other countries. And we succeeded to provide all the innovation, all this professional attitude to the festival, and we could considerably grow the incomes. Apart in Valencia, apart from Tomatina, there are a lot of events. You know that you have direct airfloat flights to Valencia, and you have a lot of other things people see apart from Tomatina. It has a beach, sun all around the year, fantastic kitchen. Everybody knows paella valenciana, a Spanish dish which comes from Valencia, and we have fantastic international contests for paella, gathering 10 to 15,000 people who come for the carnival, the festival of meat, food, and it has advantages and downsides. It gathers a lot of people from all over Spain. We have a wonderful research city built by Calatrava, the architect. We have the historical downtown with a great image. So all these concepts allow us to attract more and more tourists. And together with our colleagues, we do everything possible to facilitate it. And just to wrap up, I would like you to know that every event should be well organized, and you need to do everything possible for the event to become repetitive, to repeat it every year, and people would keep telling each other, and people will tell everyone about the festivals. So Tomatina really became important due to mouth of the word. So if a person wants to create an event, he must remember that people must feel as actors. They must feel as a part of the event, heroes of the event. You know, just eating some paella is not a festival. Okay. So, okay, the message is you need to come to Valencia. You have fantastic meat, paella. Okay, we waited for two more experts to come. Mr. Kushnirovich is disassembling some football city, Arkady. As far as I know, you run several restaurants in Moscow. But let me know if you will be firing people once the World Cup is over. And have you prepared? Well, if you prepared in terms of languages, in terms of staff training, okay. First of all, I would like to thank Muscovites for supporting and bearing this festival. It wasn't very easy, and last night we watched celebrations in France, and sadly we had no fighting. We didn't fire any waiter after that. As for me, I remember a time when there was Mr. Lee, a cafe between Zoom and our restaurant. And I thought, why? Why they need the pedestrian areas, walkways? Why should people walk around? Who needs it? There were like parkings, people, okay. And I was protesting for a while. And so I had to wait. But if we would discuss what happened in recent month, it was surprising. It was stunning. I'm accustomed to everything. I was born in Moscow. I saw everything. I don't remember a Moscow like this, with that number of foreign peoples, vivid colors, smiles, queues for the restaurants. It's a dream. We would like to repeat it again and again without any stop. But if we would talk about economics, what happens economically? So the lucky opportunity was for us to open several restaurants at Nikolska. Well, of course, some of them had to work twice as much in terms of turnover and traffic. There is a Вокруг Света restaurant. So we had a discussion with my friends. So should we have closed the restaurants and started to sell beer alone? The profit would be twice as high. We'll really lack to food. So it's like a single case I know in Russia, and I would like to recall. So I came to Вокруг Света, that place, and it's always overcrowded. Well, and I realized that there was one girl sitting on the table, and she told me, Novikov, that's Novikov, yeah. And it was impossible to stay there. It was a big celebration, with people singing, dancing, and so on. So, but economically, of course, we made some money. Of course, we were all tired. All employees were working overtime. But I would agree with Vadim that Moscow still lacks exciting celebrations, exciting events that could create tourists. Tourists are blood for hotels, restaurants, and the entire business. So, no, Natalia Sergunina seems to be a little bit critical. Yes, but I would like to thank you all for that event to be hosted in Russia, that everything was fine, everything went smooth. And thanks God it's over. Thank you. Thank you, guys. I think we had a very fruitful and informative discussion. A little comment to what Arkady said. Because we are also applying for some other major events, and when we do them, we would always write where to put the fan zone. And so it's confidential information, and nobody but you will know about them, and your competitors will know about that post factum, after all. Thank you, guys, for this really exciting session.